Hi everyone, it's me, B at Kelly Sunflower. So I thought I'd hop on today and share with you decks that I worked with that were published in 2020. Um, this month of December, I had like a no-buy deck. So although I may have shown some decks on my YouTube and Instagram channel, they were actually decks that I pre-ordered prior to December and arrived in December. So I acquired quite a lot of decks this year, 2020, but I haven't worked with all of them. So I'm just going to show you the ones that I either worked with or attempted to work with. So I'm going to flip my camera around and show you those decks. Okay, so the decks that I want to showcase are a mixture of Tarot, Oracle and Lenormand decks. Okay, so I'm going to show you these decks in no particular order. The very first deck that was published in 2020, that I received in 2020, was this deck here. It's the Starseed Oracle. I received this in January this year. And it's created by Rebecca Campbell. And the artwork is done by Danielle Noel. So this deck came with a nice substantial guidebook. Love the imagery, but for some reason I can only read it for daily pulls. It has quite nice messages on there, and I just tend to when I'm in the mood, just pull a card, place it on one of my altars, and just read the guidebook that comes along with it. So that's how I work with this deck. So this is the Starseed Oracle. So another deck that I received in 2020 is this one. It's called the Primordial Tarot, and it's by Sergio Toppi. This deck used to be called, I think it's called the Tarot of the Origins, and it was a Lascarabelle deck, and it wasn't borderless. This deck, I think I prefer the previous edition. But for some reason with this deck, it's not that I don't gel with the imagery, because I actually like the imagery. I just find it quite difficult to read as a tarot deck. The suits are colour-coded, and the court cards are just a continuation. So the pages are 11, the knights are 12, the queens are 13, and the kings are 14. I just can't read of it as a tarot deck. So how I use this deck is that I just do it again for daily pulls. I mainly use it as a oracle type deck. So the Cosmic Slumber Tarot deck was gifted to me by Illuminal 11 for review, and I have done a walkthrough on this deck. This was also published in 2020. It came in a tin with some other accessories and a nice hardback small guidebook. This deck is lovely. It's very dreamlike. Some of the archetypes or the images don't necessarily fit the archetype that you might have in your head of RWS cards. The more you work with this deck, the more you will kind of get it. Well, that's the experience that I've had with this deck. I tend to use this deck for reading for myself, not so much for other people, because it's quite a deep deck, so I prefer to use it for myself for self readings. It has gorgeous silver edgings there, and it's just a lovely deck, and I've enjoyed working with it for this year 2020. So the next deck that I would like to show you is called the Desert Dreamwork Oracle. I'm not sure if this was published in 2020. I'm only assuming that it was. I got this from Little Red Tarot, but it's also available on makeyourplayingcards.com. Came with this nice kind of bag, and it also comes with a PDF. It's about 16 pages. Let me just check. Yep, it's 16 pages, and it gives you meanings to the cards. This is a 50 card deck, and I read this deck intuitively. These are the backs of the cards. It's got like desert sceneries there. And it's just keywords. But for some reason I can read this deck intuitively. It's also got, to me anyway, it's got some association to the tarot card. So for example, the money card, I see that as the Pentacles. I think it's got the king, you know, that's all the kings. It's got the death card in there, awake, ancestor. But it does have some cards that I kind of can associate to the tarot. And when I'm reading those cards, I do tend to associate tarot meanings. Like this one to me reminds me a lot of the strength card in tarot. Swords. I mean, you can read it as a system, and it does come with some spreads in the guidebook, and there are meanings, like I said, so you can read it as a system, but I tend to read this deck intuitively. Another deck that was published in 2020 is this one here. It's called the Sacred Self-Care Oracle by Powell. I love this oracle deck. It just gives you self-care prompts. The guidebook is quite informative, and for each card it gives you a mantra. It gives you some self-care tips and some journal prompts should you want to journal your self-care journey. Lovely cards, you know, so connect with your crystals, create art, make a vision board, spend time with animals. It's just a beautiful deck, and the actual colour palette as well, I find it quite pleasing and quite calming. Look for the fairies. So this is the Sacred Self-Care Oracle. So this deck here, the Badass Tarot, was published in 2020, and I bought this directly through the creator via Pepper Squirrel. So this deck, I really find it difficult to read as a tarot card deck. I think because it doesn't come with a guidebook, it's just got this card here, which basically says that you must use your intuition, and it's supposed to be loosely based on the Riderweight Smith deck. These are the backs of the cards. They're very, very glossy cards, and some of the cards I can read, but I just can't read it as a tarot deck. I prefer to read it more as an oracle deck. I find sometimes that creators want you to use your intuition, and they say that a deck is a Rider-Waite Smith kind of system, but sometimes you're not in that author's head, and I find it very difficult sometimes to read intuitively decks that don't have at least a printout sheet, because at least then if you can understand where the author's coming from, then to me you can use your own intuition. So I think the author at one point on Instagram did say that she would create a kind of PDF guidebook, because I think other people had the same concerns in terms of trying to read this deck. So hopefully if that guidebook or PDF does get completed, it will give me more insight into the cards. But for now, I just use it as an oracle rather than a tarot deck. Okay, so this deck here, which is called the Witch's Wisdom Tarot, I'm still working with this deck. Beautiful deck, comes in a nice bag. You know, there's been loads of flip throughs and reviews on this deck, but I'm finding it quite difficult to work with. I think because the major arcana cards have been reversed, and you start with the world card. I mean, I've tried to put it in order of how I know tarot. You know, the majors, the wands, the cups, the swords, and the pentacles. But I think I need to read the guidebook first before I can work with this deck. However, I have been using this deck more as an oracle rather than a tarot, because I need to understand the concept of this deck properly before I can work with it as a tarot deck. But it is a gorgeous deck. It's nice imagery, nice card stock, and the book is very well written. So I'm reading the book from top to bottom. And once I've understood the concept of this deck, I think I'll be able to work with it more as a tarot deck. So this deck here, the Golden Girls tarot deck, is just a regular Riderweight Smith deck in terms of structure, and it's just around the sitcom series The Golden Girls. I find this deck quite easy to read. I feel that even if you're not a Golden Girl fan, you'll be able to kind of work with this deck, because it is very Rider-Waite Smith-ish, and each of the minor arcana suits is connected to a Golden Girl tarot. It's nice deck, nice imagery, very easy to work with, and I have enjoyed using this deck. Okay, so this deck here, the Heaven and Earth Tarot, published by Lescarabel. Let me just take it out of its bag. I love this deck. Again, it's another Rider-Waite Smith inspired deck, which is my preferred system for reading the tarot. If you can read Rider-Waite Smith, you know, you won't have no problem reading this deck. Lovely colour palette. Comes with a really nice guidebook, long guidebook. Bit glossy, so it's quite hard to photograph if you're using them, you know, in lives or on Instagram. But to read as a deck, that it's gorgeous. The only thing I don't like about this deck is the keywords. They're really, really small, and they kind of strain my eyes. So this is the Heaven and Earth tarot deck. So Threadbound Oracle. I got this deck because I have the tarot deck that was created by this creator, the Lenormand Tarot. Love the concept of it being like a book. Isn't it gorgeous? The whole packaging is gorgeous. But this is more like a tarot system. It comes with a really good book. The creator said he wants this deck to be read as a story, which I've tried to do. Gorgeous backs, you know, thread for bookbinding and stuff. Lovely cardstock, and it's split into, well, the cards are split into certain groups. So you get the people cards, you get the places cards, and then you get 3 suits. So you can kind of read it as its own system. But I like to read this deck for daily pulls, or for sometimes as clarifiers. It's a look at that, isn't it gorgeous? Very nice deck. I really do enjoy working with this deck. Okay, so the Fredborn Oracle. So this one here, my garden deck by Molly. This was a Kickstarter deck. I like that it comes in kind of like sustainable, reusable packaging. You know, no frills, kind of stuff. It didn't come with a guidebook, but the author did give everyone who backed this deck on Kickstarter a workbook of the major arcana, which you can work through at your own leisure. These are the backs of the cards. They're pocket size, so they're quite small, nice square shape. But these cards are kind of scuffing. Can you see? I don't know if you can see it on the camera. They're not very durable. Again, it's another take of the Rider-Waite Smith deck, but, you know, very inclusive, very diverse, and it makes you think, because some of the depictions are not what you would think these cards will be. So a lovely deck, but I just wish that the cardstock, not that I'm a cardstock snob, but I just wish that the cardstock was more durable, because as I said before, they are kind of scuffing and they look quite worn already, and I've only used this deck about 3 or 4 times. So this is the My Garden deck by Polly Noir. So another deck that I received this year that was also published this year is When Life Gives You Mango's Lenormand Oracle. So this is a circle shape Lenormand inspired oracle. It does come with a separate guidebook here, and even though it's small, it gives you a lot of information about Lenormand and why the creator chose to use certain titles on her cards. So I think with this deck, a lot of the titles have been changed, or the archetypes have been changed, because the creator has modeled it around her life in the Caribbean. I mean, the house is the same, and then she gives kind of like keywords, which to me are quite good Lenormand keywords. And it's numbered as well. There's no playing card associations on the cards, but in the book she does give playing card associations. So the keys for the normal one. I mean, this one here would have been the letter, but I think that if you know your Lenormand numbering and you can read Lenormand, I think this you shouldn't have any problems with this deck. It took me quite a while to get my name around the new titles, but I've been really enjoying using this deck. So this is the When Life Gives You Mango's Lenormand deck. So this deck here, the Uncommon Tarot deck, kind of reminds me of another deck that I'm going to show you in a minute. This is a collage deck, and I do like my collage decks. It's by Shaheen Moriro. Nice cardstock. I'll just show you some of the cards. Has nice silver edging. The book is quite substantial, and it is Ryderweight inspired. Very diverse. Gives a different take to the meanings of the cards. In fact, you can read this deck also intuitively. What I can anyway. I've enjoyed working with it, but again, the archetypes writing is quite small. So sometimes I think when the images have been changed, I like to be able to read the archetypes quite clearly. But apart from that, it's a gorgeous deck, and I really have enjoyed working with this deck. So this deck here, the Superlunaris Tarot deck, was a Kickstarter campaign that I recently got. And in some ways it reminds me of the Uncommon Tarot deck in terms of the artwork, or the art style, I should say. So again, this is a collage deck. It comes with a bit of information and stuff, like a pull-out sheet. It's got lovely... People say this is pink, but to me it looks like it's copper. So I think people have got different lenses on how they view colour. This deck is just gorgeous. Very nice cardstock, very inclusive. It is starting to chip a bit as well, this deck. I've been using it quite a bit, and I don't know if it's visible on the camera, but some of the cards have started to chip already. But very easy to work with, very easy to read, tells me nice stories, and I've really been enjoying working with this deck. And the final deck that I want to share with you, that was published in 2020 and that came just a few days ago, is this one here. It's the 100% Plastic Rider Tarot deck by US Games. So this deck has surprised me. It's a plaid back deck. Comes with just like a little white book with some information cards. This deck doesn't feel plastic at all. For some reason, I just thought it'd be made out of very thin plastic, but there's no plasticky feeling whatsoever. The cards are quite thin, very easy to shuffle. They were a bit slippery when I first started to shuffle with them. as I said before, they're plaid backs, and this is my first plaid back Riderweight Smith deck. It's just a regular Riderweight Smith deck. I like the colouring in this deck, but this is a really nice deck. It shuffles well, smooth, and it's not plastic. Well, I know it is plastic, but it doesn't feel like plastic whatsoever. It's got a nice smell to it as well. They said that this deck is 50 times more durable than a paper deck, so I'm going to see if that comes into play. But I've only been using this deck for a few days, but I have been enjoying working with this deck. So these are the decks that I have in my collection, or that I have used, and that were also published in 2020. I do have some more decks that I published in 2020, but I haven't really worked with them that much. So thank you so much for watching. I will try and add links to these decks if I can get them in the description bar. See you in my next video. Bye for now.